Call our meeting to order. First item we have, is there any bill introductions? Seeing none. First item we have is a briefing on the foster care, and we'll have Scott Hendricks, Director of the Permanency Kansas Department of Children and Families. Scott, welcome to committee.
I'm the Director of Permanency and Licensing for the Kansas Department for Children and Families. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm going to present to you an overview on the process of becoming a foster parent, family foster home licensure in Kansas. I'll also give you some current timelines and some data toward the end. We'll start with some basic definitions of what a family foster home is. It is a child care facility in a private residence and including any adjacent grounds that provides 24-hour care to children, one or more children, and it does require licensure. Currently, we have 3 program types of family foster homes. First and foremost, there's a general family foster home, which means that licensee can care for unrelated children. The next 2 program types are what we refer to as child-specific or specific child family foster homes. The first being a non-related kinship, or what we refer to as an NR-kin home. That means the adult has an existing emotional tie or relationship with the child or the child's parents. And then we also have a relative licensure, which is obviously this person is related to the child by blood, marriage, or adoption. Relatives can be a placement and do not have to become licensed, but they may choose that option if they want to, as licensure will increase their support and subsidy. Another definition this morning is a child placing agency. That is a business whose role is to find, place, and support a home for children for adoption or foster care purposes. And our role as DCF in this equation is that we are the regulatory and licensing agency for family foster homes and child placing agency. Regulation includes the application process, licensure, on-site visits, any investigations, renewals, and general oversight of the license. The steps to becoming and what it takes to become a foster parent or a licensed family foster home. We'll start with the application process and sponsorship and eligibility. In Kansas, in accordance with regulation, an individual or family who is starting the process of becoming a family foster home must be sponsored by a child placing agency. That agency's role is to sponsor their application and the duration of their licensure. A potential foster home has the right to choose any child placing agency they want to, and they can also change their sponsoring agency at any time. And as well, the child placing agency will agree to sponsor that family or that home. If a prospective applicant wants to find a list of potential or of current CPAs, they can reach out to a CPA directly, or they can contact DCF or the Children's Alliance of Kansas for a full statewide list. Currently, there are 18 licensed CPAs who provide this service for DCF. To be eligible to become a foster parent, one must be at least 21 years of age. They have sufficient income or resources to meet and provide the basic needs of a foster family. They also must be willing to participate in a family assessment conducted by their sponsoring child placing agency to ensure that they are able to meet regulatory requirements and their readiness to serve children in the custody of the secretary. Continuing with the application process are pre-application requirements. First and foremost is training. During this time with sponsorship, the CPA and the applicant will start building that relationship. That would usually include reviewing, getting to know the CPA-specific policies, procedures, etc. Next is the pre-licensure or preparatory training. This would be probably the most lengthy part of the entire process. There are currently 3 options. I would like to also say that the preparatory or pre-licensure training is required by regulation and also federal mandate. There's currently 3 options. Most notable is TIPS MAP. That is an acronym for Trauma Informed for Permanency and Safety, Model Approach to Partnerships and Parenting. That is a 10-week course. Other options include Deciding Together, which is 7 weeks, and the National Training and Development Curriculum, the NTDC, which is also approximately 10 weeks. Previously, those were all in person. In recent years, our partners at Children's Alliance, who are our contracted provider to provide this training, they're all now accessible online, virtually. Additional trainings required for pre-application include regulatory topics such as medication administration, first aid, and universal precautions. Some additional pre-application steps include the CPA assisting the family or the home with completing the actual application form and the required supporting documents. Those documents will include a health assessment, a TB skins test, tuberculosis test, any immunizations, background check forms, pet vaccinations if applicable, a floor plan of the residence to assure square footage requirements, egress, routes of egress, etc. The aforementioned family assessment, a family budget, and the training certificates to verify that they indeed have completed those preparatory and training requirements. Additionally, for any resident of the home, age 14 or over, they will submit fingerprints. Those will result in a federal criminal history check as well as a national sex offender registry check. Additionally, during this time, the CPA will complete a walkthrough of the home with the family just in preparation to verify readiness for compliance and make sure that they are meeting regulation. When it comes to submitting the application, the CPA will submit the application and supporting documents to DCF licensing via email. Upon receipt, DCF licensing personnel will review the application and supporting documents for completeness. At that point, they will start entering information into our licensing system of record, which is a Child Care Licensing and Regulation Information System known as CLARIS. CLARIS is KDHE. It's owned by the Department for Health and Environment, but is a shared system. They will also enter personal information on any residents of the home listed on the application, and additional background checks will be ordered. Those backgrounds and checks include, for any residents age 10 and above, a Kansas Bureau of Investigation name-based criminal history check, a Child Abuse Neglect Central Registry check in Kansas, and in the event that any resident of the home, 18 or older, has lived out of state, a Child Abuse and Neglect Registry check will be conducted in that state as well. Of note, once background checks are completed and cleared, a temporary permit may be issued to an NR-kin or a relative placement at that time, as allowed by KSA 65504. There is not a temporary permit issued for a general care license until all complete. Once the application is entered into the system of record, DCF will assign an on-site survey by a DCF licensing worker. We have workers in all regions throughout the state. That licensing worker will work directly with the home and work with the child placing agency to coordinate a time for visit. For a general foster home license, that visit will occur within 15 days of the survey being assigned. For NR-kin and relative homes, that will be completed within 30 days of assignment. What occurs during the visit is the licensing surveyor will determine regulation compliance or non-compliance. Typically, they will go through the sit down with the family, go through the records they have on the file, including those supporting documents. They'll do a walkthrough of home to check compliance with all applicable regulations. If the home is in compliance with all regulations, then a license will be issued within 3 business days. If there is non-compliance with various regulations, in accordance with statute, the home and the CPA will have 5 days to complete a plan of compliance or get the matter rectified in full compliance. Once the plan is submitted, the licensing worker will verify corrections and compliance, and then again, a license will be issued within 3 days. Exceptions to regulations. An applicant or a licensee may submit a request for an exception to a regulation in accordance with existing DCF licensing procedures. Again, this is only, exceptions are only allowed for regulations and not statute. And this determination is made in the best interest of the child, and again, assurance that it doesn't violate statute. So, when it comes to issuing the actual license after the on-site survey and visit is complete, the license will be mailed to the family foster home and emailed to the child placing agency. The license is valid for the licensee and is address specific. Therefore, if a licensed foster family moves to a new residence, then another on-site visit will have to occur. The license will identify capacity, including age range and number of children. The license is non-expiring, and annual renewals are required. Annual renewal includes another on-site visit and an additional 8 hours of documented training. Some timeline numbers for the last 2 calendar years. In 2020, we received 766 applications, and the average time frame from receipt of a complete application to license being issued was 85.5 days approximately. In 2021, we received 987 applications, and the timeline from receipt of a complete application to the license being issued was down to 31.3 days. So what we've done in recent years is tried to instill a common sense approach to licensing. Our objective is to help families become licensed and remain licensed. We've attempted to streamline a lot of our process by avoiding duplication. And as I mentioned, Children's Alliance of Kansas has increased training accessibility. Additionally, we've incorporated expedited processes for relatives who choose to become licensed, again, to increase their supports. And we are in the process of a full family foster home regulation revision to modernize the regulations a little bit because they were somewhat outdated and presented some barriers. Some of the challenges, current challenges to timeliness with license issuance, timely enrollment in the required preparatory classes, timely enrollment and completion of first aid class. Regulation indicates that needs to be face-to-face. However, we do allow virtual first aid as long as it is instructor-led. Another barrier is submission of incomplete applications. If the application is not complete, we cannot start the process of entering data and ordering a survey. Delays in correcting regulatory non-compliance. As 2020, those numbers were increased, the timeline for issuance of a license, large in part due to delay of on-site inspection due to isolation, quarantine, or other matters related to the pandemic. And while we have streamlined a significant amount of processes with the systems that we have and the resources that we have, the lack of an online application still continues to result in a duplication of work, specifically data reentry occurs. And another barrier is the existing statute to prohibited persons and offenses. That eliminates some folks from being eligible to become licensed or remain licensed. So current as of this week, you'll see a map of existing foster homes in Kansas. It's broken down by the number of homes in each individual county. As you can see, we currently have 2,636 licensed homes in Kansas. The total capacity of those homes, they can be licensed for up to 4, is 6,806 licensed beds. That concludes my presentation, and I will stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Scott. So 2,636 homes, how many do we really need? I mean, or how many are we short?
I think we are always looking to expand our capacity. I think there are some specific types of homes that for those hard to place kids that we can, where we're looking into finding some solutions for. I think general capacity, we're close. I think it's there but not every child fits in every home. So we are taking some steps to look at some new levels or types of homes, if you will, to meet those high acuity older children.
So you're saying that if someone calls today and needs a home for 3 foster children, we have a home available today for them? Not special needs, but just a regular foster child.
I would say yes, generally. And part of this, Senator, is that exception process. Specifically, we will grant overcapacity exceptions if needed, in the event to keep sibling sets together, et cetera. So it's really a partnership between the child placing agencies, case management providers, and DCF to make this work. So
the other question I have is, how was you able to lower the days in getting an application processed and licensed? You went from 85 to 31. That's great progress. How'd you do that?
I think a lot of it was just internal review of how things were previously going, or the processes we had in place prior. We tried to utilize as much technology as we could. Again, it's limited, but rather than using fax machines, we use emails, and we shortened the application itself, and we really focused on the health and safety regulations rather than other regulations that, might not be as critical. Again, we're holding them in compliance with that, but we have measures like the exception process, et cetera, in place to speed that up. And I also think the pandemic onset in 2020 had a large factor, was a large factor in that lengthened timeline in 2020. We had to create some virtual processes on the fly, if you will. The licensing or the need for licensing and placements didn't stop during the pandemic, so we really had to make some adjustments to keep getting homes licensed.
So what you're saying, like from 19 to 20, it went up, and now it went back down?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. Other questions? Senator Solon-Trump?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several very short questions real quickly. Can a relative get a license after the adoption has already occurred?
After adoption?
You indicated that a relative may become licensed, but doesn't necessarily have to. Can they then take the course after and then get the further credits and support?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, Senator, a child can be placed with a relative, and they will be supported, and they will get payment. If that relative chooses, they can become licensed. That will increase the support and payment amounts.
After the actual adoption, they can go back and
doesn't
go through that and get some additional support and so forth. Okay.
Not necessarily an adoption, the placement. Yes.
Yeah, placement. In the application process, and you've got these 10-week, 7-week, 10-week, can those be all done simultaneously?
They only need to complete one of the three.
Okay, all right. What's the most common problem in the application process when the person goes out to do a site survey? Is there some commonality in any of that?
That would be something that we would need to check with our actual surveyors about, the most common. I'll be glad to get some data and present that to you.
Last question real quick. How many children are waiting to be adopted?
It's a little over 400, I believe.
How many are in foster care? I mean,
As of this week, I believe it was 6,500.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn.
Just a question on the challenges to timeliness, and without me looking up KSA 65516, prohibited persons / offenses. Why is that a challenge? I mean, it looks to me like that's a person that wouldn't qualify.
It presents some barriers in this, particularly for relatives who do choose to be licensed, are not eligible to be licensed if they do have a prohibiting offense, even if it's been determined that might be the best placement for the child. That's one example. There's currently no or very limited room for discretion or a appeal. There's no appeal. There's no statute of limitations, et cetera, within that statute. So juvenile offenses, et cetera.
So it looks like a good fit for the care home, but they evidently have a previous record.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the information you got today. I just have a general question. That Office of Child Advocate that's newly created, how does that play into what you do? And if someone has a problem in foster care, and then can a child advocate change anything? Or, I mean, what's their role with your foster care?
Well, Senator, I think some of that is still to be determined a little bit, but we anticipate a very close working relationship with the Office of Child Advocacy, and then trying to do whatever we can to make the system better. I anticipate there will be a lot of discussion on our current processes and how we can improve that, and then move forward together. So, I don't know if I have a specific answer to that, but yeah.
I'm interested to see how.
Yes.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you said that the secretary, you put on here application process, and that the secretary, that there could be exceptions that would be granted. Would that be, when you made a comment about trying to keep siblings together, so you would increase the number, is that an example of exception?
Yes. I mean, a very basic example would be if a family foster home is in a sibling set's local community. Say it's a sibling set of 3. That family foster home already is licensed for 4, but already has 2 children placed. If that family is determined to be a good fit for those 3 siblings, then their child placing agency would submit an exception request to go over capacity by 1. In other words, they would have the 2 in placement, then they could accept those sibling set of 3. So therefore, they'd have 5 children in care in their home.
So would that be the most likely exception that would be granted by the secretary, or there just could be a gamut of exceptions?
There are other reasons that, you mean specifically for overcapacity, or just?
It
Yes.
says an applicant or licensee may request an exception from the secretary.
Yes, it's applicable to any current family foster home regulation. So, and there's a lot of them. It could be applicable to any regulation.
And I would, the chairman mentioned about the reduction in the average days to complete. I mean, it is substantial. That's a great move in the right direction. I also noticed the number of applications, that's a pretty substantial increase in number of applications. Is there anything different that was done between 20 and 21?
I'm not certain if anything was done differently. Again, I think the pandemic played a big role in that, and I think there was some reservations perhaps by a lot of families across the state to, do we really want to, go through this process right now? But all of our child placing agencies, our case management providers do a good job of recruiting homes. There's a lot of networking that goes on, a lot of campaigns, if you will, to try to encourage people to become foster parents.
So does that mean, was that 766 then a drop from 19 and 21 is more of a normal number?
Yeah, I would say 21 is more normal, yes.
Okay. And lastly, I know last year, I thought that this was, went into a bill in conference committee. I know last year there was a piece of legislation to, when the question was asked about prohibited persons and offenses under 65-516, there was a legislation to allow siblings, children of the foster care provider that may have had issues to be able to move back in the home. Did that not pass?
That was included. The original proposed bill did not pass, but there was language included in another bill, which allowed a very narrow scope for that discretion to be allowed, and it's really specific to the child or a young adult, if you will. It's narrow due to age range that was written in. I believe it's 18 and older. In other words, typically that would be a child has aged out of foster care, if you will, or transitioned into adulthood, and perhaps they want to go back and live with their previous foster family, but if that child had a prohibiting offense, they weren't allowed to. The language that was written into, I believe it was 2148, but not certain. That would allow that to occur. However, it's such a narrow scope, we have yet to have one occurrence of that, where it's actually had to go to the secretary for review and discretion to be applied.
That did pass last year, didn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it went into the conference committee.
Correct. And we're grateful for that, but it's a fairly narrow scope.
Thank you.
Senator Saltram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the second time. On slide 15, you indicate, again, 987 applications for 2021. How many of those were accepted?
I would have to pull that information and get it back to you. I would typically it's a small number that are
Right.
how many of those were accepted?
Right.
All of those were accepted.
Okay, so those, well, it says number of applications.
Yes.
So nobody was denied?
Oh, this doesn't include the denied. If there were denied applications, yes, but that number is typically fairly small, but that is not included in the 987.
Okay, that's my curiosity. How many applications were there, actual applications, and how many got denied? So if you can follow that up. Real quick, again, I think this is related to Senator Petty's question. What was is there any commonality for the denied applications?
Typically, it would revolve around the prohibited persons. And I believe, I'll get you specific data, but I believe that number there was 9 or 10.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering how many licenses have been pulled in the last year for issues or non-compliance?
That's another number that I can pull for you and get to you. It's an actual legal process that occurs, a process of revocation. It goes through the courts, but there's definitely some each year. So,
Okay. And my second question is understanding the funding by the state for foster homes. Let's say I got my license, I'm with a CPA, I'm ready for a foster child. How much money do I get from the state and that kind of thing? How's the funding work?
There's a specific rate for each level of care that the child is determined to need. So there's a rate breakdown based on levels of care and whether or not the child is on the IDD waiver, et cetera. That's something we can get you that graph and that information as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Scott. Appreciate
Thank you all.
presentation. Next, we'll have a briefing on the Special Committee on Child Support Enforcement and Collection. Sharday Kane on WebEx.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sharday Kane, and I am a fiscal analyst for the Kansas Legislative Research Department. This is my second year, and one of the budgets that I will be presenting before the subcommittee is the Department for Children and Families. So I help facilitate the Special Committee on Child Support Enforcement and Collection. As you may remember, the Special Committee was a part of a provision in Senate Bill 159 from last year, and the LCC approved 2 meeting days for the committee to meet. They met on October 19th and November 9th. Most of my presentation will be based on page 3 of the green document that you have before you, which is the conclusions and recommendations from the committee. The committee recommended 7 action items for the Department for Children and Families. Most of these are related to research and communication between the agency and other parties involved. The first one is exploring best practices for child support enforcement and collection in other states and identifying any legislative changes that may be needed. Establishing reciprocity agreements with bordering states to improve cross-state coordination. Streamlining the process for payees and payors when cases move between the 4D and non-4D programs. So just to clarify, a 4D program is a DCF program, or a DCF case rather, and that means that one of the parents is either receiving public assistance or has decided that they want DCF to work with them to make sure that the payor is paying the money and the payee is receiving the money in the DCF process way. And a non-4D case is when DCF is not involved, and that means that either the court trustees are making sure that process runs smoothly or they're doing it privately between the two parties. The next one is determining and monitoring improved performance measures for both the 4D and non-4D programs. The agency discussed a lot about their 5 performance measures that are required by the federal government and discussed how they come to those numbers, how those numbers are determined, and how those work with the contractors that are involved. And the next one is ensuring every family can access a child support professional through DCF, child support contractors, or both. Introducing a customer service evaluation for clients. And lastly, reinstating quarterly or monthly meetings. That was mostly because of when the state privatized child support enforcement and collection, they stopped having quarterly or monthly meetings between court trustees and DCF. So trying to have more of a communicative process for them moving forward. The committee also asked for additional information to be provided, and that information was provided to the committee before the end of the year. And if the committee did not receive sufficient information, then the committee would recommend the Legislative Post-Audit Committee request an audit be conducted by the Legislative Division of Post-Audit after the current contractors have had 6 months to a year to perform under the contracts. As of October 1st, 2021, This program, the Child Support Enforcement and Collection, moved from 4 contractors to 2, Maximus and Young Williams. So the committee wanted to make sure that those 2 new contractors had the opportunity to learn their new system, learn their new processes and their new areas, because they also changed areas as far as where they are in the state. And then if that is needed, then that audit would be released to the committees that are addressed in the last portion of that document and the last portion of that page. And the rest of the document outlines more details on the committee testimony and presentations that were held during those 2 meeting days. That wraps up the report, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Chardy. I think before we have questions for you, I would like to ask Senator McGinn if she has anything in particular as being chair of that committee that maybe you'd like to highlight for our committee.
Well, and we'll hear from the agency as well, or anybody from the agency going to speak on this at all, or didn't no one come? I'll speak first. I just wondered if you were going to speak. Only, okay, because you can certainly have the opportunity to correct anything I say, so just want to give you that opportunity. So basically what we were finding out was people would start the process and then they don't hear anything back. Or couldn't find where their case was. And some also, in addition to this challenge, and you'll see here in one of the bullets about the cross-state coordination, there was certainly one situation where if that spouse was in not a spouse, but a removed parent was in another state and self-employed, there's no way to force that individual to make payments. So we would like to know more about what other states are doing to comply with that. And there is some federal funding, I believe, that does help with that. We did listen to the district courts. They had a lot of information to provide, and so you either go through the court system, and that's usually because the couple had agreed to go that route. But then if you qualify, as Charday said, into the 4D system, then you're kicked into back into the DCF system. And then you work with between DCF and the contractor, which is Young Williams and Maximus. And there seemed to be a lot of pointing fingers at one another and lack of communication to get to these individuals that need their money. So the hope, of course, is that there'll be better communications through DCF. So let's just say I don't hear something for 2 weeks or something. There needs to be a system in place that's a follow-up or a number you can call and say, I haven't heard. Can you tell me what the status of the case is? So that's just kind of the general overall. I don't know if Senator Petty followed that. I think she was supposed to be on the committee but was out of town. But we did have the hearings on this last year during session. We had 2 or 3 and still couldn't get our hands wrapped around it. So that's why we ended up having this 2-day committee with these recommendations. And then I believe, I was trying to look at that timeline that we gave them. Charday, if you could help me, if some of these improvements weren't made, wasn't there a certain point in time where the committee would ask for a post-audit?
Mr. Chair, yes, that was 6 months to a year, and then requesting that post-audit.
6 months to a year, and do you mean starting January 1st of this year or starting, I guess that would be right because that would be the official when the report is done. So we'll be monitoring this for 6 months to a year, and then if we don't see progress, that we'll ask for a post-audit. Is that correct, Charday?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. So I don't know, again, if you followed it or not, or if the agency would like to make some comments as well.
Thank you, Senator McGinn. The agency, would you answer a few questions? Senator Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll let you identify yourself so I can address you appropriately.
Hi there, I'm Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary for the Department for Children and Families. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Keys. When I want to go back to the trustees. So when a trustee, when enforcement is left up to the trustees, do they have the same tools available to them as DCF does to enforce child support payments being paid? Or is there a different set of laws that you have access to at DCF that can incent someone to pay on time?
I can make sure that I get a complete answer to you. I don't think there's a different set of laws. With regard to 4D programs that DCF manages in terms of beneficiaries, there might be additional tools or specific tools based on who we're serving that we would be using. But to my knowledge, the laws are not different. Some of the procedures or tools might be given 4D and non-4D.
And then also wanted to discuss really quickly the fees for child support payments. Are those applied to the recipient? Are they shared? Or are they taken out of the amount of child support being paid?
I do have a helper here with me who's an expert. I don't know that detailed answer. We can get you that answer. I apologize, I don't
That's
know
fine.
that
And then
detail.
I guess I'd also just be interested in overall what it costs or what is received in fees to offset the cost to the agency overall in the course of a year.
Okay, the fee schedule, we can get you the fee schedule.
But I would like a total amount, like a total amount over the year, what you take in fees off of child support.
Yes, we can get that for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn.
Follow up on the tools that you can use. I believe you received federal dollars to help get this money from the one entity to the other person. There's some federal dollars that I don't know if Maximus or Young Williams can access the same as DCF.
Maximus and Young Williams as our contractors accessing, is that your
There's a
question?
different set of tools. And Sade, do you remember the federal dollars? I don't have that background information with me that DCF receives.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the agency pays in 34%, if I'm not mistaken, and they can receive up to 66% based on their maintenance of effort amount for child support services in general.
Which is used to get the paying party to pay? I mean, you use it in that capacity?
Yes, the federal financial participation to help with the total cost, yes.
And does Maximus and Young Williams they don't have that opportunity to use that money as private contractors?
Well, they are contractors of
Of
DCF.
yours. So you use that money to assist them as well?
To assist the operation of child support services and collection. Those federal dollars help the state manage the 4D program.
I'm most interested in the collection side, so.
We can get that answer for you. I'm sorry, I don't have those details. I apologize.
Are there any other questions for the department? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really wasn't on the committee. Senator Holster was. I did read all your materials and was very interested because I was on this subcommittee before last year. So, Tanya, I do have some materials here that came out with the committee. I know there's a difference between what TANF supports come in? I was looking at the pass-through policies. Can you talk at all about that, about the pass-through policies when it comes to child support enforcement?
I can speak to that Kansas does not pass through collections that we receive for families to those beneficiaries who would have been receiving TANF benefits. We are not a pass-through state. There are a number of states who are pass-through, meaning what we're able to collect either in part or in whole. There are some states who directly pass through that benefit amount to the beneficiary of TANF. Kansas is not a pass-through state.
So that means that any money that comes in DCF keeps, it doesn't go to the family. Is that correct?
It doesn't go directly, the full amount doesn't go directly to the family as a pass-through directly to them. Some of those dollars do go towards administering the program. So there are distinctions in different approaches to pass through, and different states have different approaches. Again, it could be 100% pass through or a portion, but Kansas doesn't elect to do that right now.
So we are, it's deposited into the agency's social welfare fee fund? Is that where that money that comes from the feds for TANF child support collections, that then goes and is within the child support system?
Yeah, I'm not confident that I know all the distinguishing factors of how it goes into the fee fund. Be happy to provide the details of the fee fund structure to folks. I apologize, I'm not an expert in the fee fund.
I just have one other thing. I'm not sure why we don't just go ahead and ask for a post audit. I'm not sure why we would wait.
Okay.
Maybe the chair from the interim might want to speak to that.
Senator McGinn?
So what we might do is after we go through the subcommittee budget process, and because that gives them time to get more information and get those folks that you said could answer the question better, we could maybe make that part of our report back to the committee of the whole.
And then just lastly, I know this was from DCF, requested supplemental information that came to the committee, and it's the budgetary information for CSS and contracts. Maybe somebody can explain this table to me. I don't quite understand it. Somebody from your department.
Yes.
Not today. I mean,
Yes, we'd be happy to provide any clarity
I'd appreciate
to the documents that have either were for the special committee or just for you all.
Yeah, this
If
was
you have
part of the special
questions.
committee.
Sure, we could be better prepared for that. I apologize.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Tanya? Senator McGinn?
Could you make sure that you note to make sure we have the right people when we have the budget committee hearing, and an answer to her question on that as well? And I think
Yes.
fee rates.
Senator Clay?
Yeah, and I guess just to put a finer point on it, I am interested in the difference between how trustees operate and how DCF operates when it comes to the enforcement, because I do know that trustees don't automatically have access to be able to do restricted driver's licenses and things like that. And that's the tools that I'm talking about, that DCF. So a parent would have to open a DCF case on their kid and move out of the trustee system to then take advantage of the ability to have those enforcements used to collect, as opposed to just simply having the trustee capable of doing that. And then, of course, the fees, I'm interested in what it costs overall, since we are on the Ways and Means Committee. And there has been talk in the past of potentially eliminating those fees so that we're not charging money out of the pockets of the individuals who are attempting to take care of children. So that's kind of where I was headed with those. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Senator Petty?
Just lastly, to follow up on that, trustees, I know we don't have trustees in all judicial areas, and I'm just curious I think we have, right, I have a map here, but what it would cost to have a trustee in every judicial district.
I don't know that information. I certainly could coordinate
There's
with
gotta be
Office of
reasons
Judicial
why we don't.
Administration. Yeah, I don't know that, but I can ask Office of Judicial Administration for assistance with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Committee, was there any other questions? If not, we'll close the hearing, and I think that concludes our work for today. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.